So began Beth's first lesson. Jenna dragged her, at first reluctant feet, into as many stores as was possible in the time remaining. As time went on, Beth relaxed and even admitted it was kind of fun. Jenna made all the difference, helping show her what looked good and what didn't. So many of the multitudes of fabrics felt sensual, and Beth wondered why men were limited to wearing the dullest fabrics when there were so many for a woman to choose from. One thing struck Beth as she was trying on a long evening gown: the weight of the satin-lined dress. It was deceptive in its look, appearing to be much lighter than it was. The way the satin slid around on her body as she turned in front of the mirror sent shivers through her feminine frame. Half wishing there was an occasion for her to wear it to, she reluctantly, and with a feeling of loss, took it off and hung it back on the hanger. Jenna saw that look in Beth's eyes and knew a corner had been turned. Beth would soon be an avid power shopper like most attractive women. They did buy one or two things. Beth saw a nice bra and panty set in lilac satin, the bra being a demi-cup and the panties were high cut. Jenna approved them, saying it didn't hurt to wear nice underwear, and Beth alone was the only one to see them, unless she wanted someone else to see them. This made Beth giggle, a sound she was getting used to making, and at least she attracted no wondering looks at her feminine laugh. Jenna called a halt to the shopping when she looked at her watch and said it was time to leave. Beth wasn't sure if she felt glad or sad at this. Being with Jenna and doing things together had been fun, even if it was only clothes shopping. The novelty of buying and trying on women's clothes had been an experience Beth decided to try again soon. Jenna stopped off at a greengrocer to buy some vegetables for dinner. They carried the bags inside Jenna's house and took them into the kitchen. Kathleen was happy to see her mom back and clamped herself like a living limpet to Jenna's leg. Laughing and tussling her daughter's hair, Jenna stumped around lopsidedly with the giggling child still holding tight. Beth looked at the pair of them and wondered what it must be like to share that kind of bond with one's child. Christine left, after getting her payment for babysitting. It was then left to the two women to put away the groceries. Jenna insisted Beth stay for dinner, which Beth, having nothing planned, accepted happily. Offering to help with dinner preparations, they were immersed in cutting and peeling vegetables when Richard came home, closely followed by Ted. The tantalizing aroma of the cooking roast led the two men into the kitchen, where they saw the two women giggling together as they worked. Beth was surprised to see Ted, but looking back at Jenna with a raised eyebrow, she saw a twinkle there that told her she had been set up. Sighing, but not really upset, Beth, with Jenna's permission, shooed the men out, saying cooking was women's work, which got a laugh from Ted and Jenna. Richard looked puzzled, having missed the joke. Beth talked about whether Richard should be told about who she really was. "And just who are you?" smiled Jenna. "Last time I checked, you were Beth?" Jenna pointed out, nodding her head in the direction of the bedroom. I guess I am." "It just seems wrong to deceive your husband like this," Beth conceded. "In time, I will, but not until things get back to normal." "No need to have too many involved at this stage," Jenna agreed. Dinner was excellent, and Beth enjoyed getting some of the praise for it, even though she protested that Jenna was really the master chef. Ted was impressed by the way Beth was handling herself. She seemed more in tune with herself, more composed. Whatever the reason for the change, Ted was pleased for her. Knowing that Colin would have eventually ended up looking like Beth, due to the DNA remapping, made him feel less guilty for the idea to mold Colin into Beth at the start. Beth was her own woman, with attributes from the best of Colin and the original Beth. This new Beth was better in his mind than the woman he fell in love with and lost. He hoped to woo this person into accepting his love as herself and not some ghost of his past. Jenna persuaded Beth to stay with Ted in the lounge while she and Richard cleared away the dishes. Kathleen, after being released from her high chair, promptly took possession of Beth's lap. Ted, sitting next to Beth, watched, fascinated, as the two cuddled and had fun. Maggie, seeming put out that her favorite lap was occupied, settled for Ted's instead. Ted fondled Maggie's ears absent-mindedly, wishing he were fondling something else. He watched Beth's animated expressions as she and Kathleen interacted together. Jenna came in to get Kathleen to take a bath. Kathleen protested loudly at first, but when Beth offered to help, she conceded defeat and tried to put on a brave face. Jenna was appreciative of the added help and confessed that bath time was always an ordeal. Beth whispered into Kathleen's ear and put her down on the floor. Jenna was flabbergasted when Kathleen ran into the bathroom on her own. "What did you say to her?" "She never runs to get a bath. Tell me the secret, please," she begged. Beth laughed and whispered in Jenna's ear. Bribing my young daughter with Maggie for the weekend, I'm not sure I approve," Jenna debated, looking rather stern. "Oh. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to." Beth started to apologize. "Don't apologize," laughed Jenna, looking at the contrite expression on Beth's face. "I was just teasing. In fact, I'm jealous of that good idea. Having Maggie over for the weekend will be fun. I can pop out later and get some food for her." "Is she toilet trained?" "Yes, she is, but I didn't think about you having to go out and buy food." "I'll happily repay you, just let me know how much, okay?" Beth urged. "Nonsense, we can afford a few tins of cat food," Jenna replied. "Maybe we can come to an agreement about sharing the kitten. Kathleen has really taken to her," she added. "Well, I would let Kathleen keep it if it's okay with you, but at the moment it's kind of company for me. We shared one heck of an experience, and she helps make my house feel just that little bit cozier. I think I'd rattle around in it if it wasn't for Maggie." "Of course, I understand. You need to get a husband or a boyfriend to help fill." "Oh God, I'm sorry," Jenna cried out. "How insensitive of me. I just keep thinking of you as Beth and not allowing for the fact there's a very different mind in that lovely body." "Now the tables are turned," smiled Beth. "It's you who doesn't have to apologize. In fact, I'm kind of flattered. If I've adjusted that well that you forget I was a man, then I must be doing something right. You know, one of my fears in becoming Beth was that I wouldn't adjust to being female and go around walking and acting like a man in a dress. I didn't want to be ridiculed and made fun of. I just want to be accepted as normal, like everybody else. I think I can accept being a woman if that's what I look like and am treated as. Honey, if you looked any more like a woman, I'd be scared." Beth looked puzzled for a moment, then blushed and burst out giggling as Jenna explained. "Yeah, I'd be scared Richard would only have eyes for you and forget about me," she said in mock seriousness. Joining Beth as she giggled, the two women hugged and then turned to see what Kathleen was up to in the bathroom. Later, bathed, talcumed, and wearing a cute kitten-covered nightdress, Kathleen was in bed holding a purring armful of fur. Both Beth and Jenna read her a story before the little one started to nod off. Maggie unwound herself out of Kathleen's arms and after looking up at the women as though seeking permission, she curled up on Kathleen's tummy and went to sleep. The women smiled at each other, forming a bond between them that would last forever as they gazed on the sleep of the innocents. Beth found something awakening inside, something that seemed to fill her with a great joy. Her emotions were closer to the surface now, and seeing the love a mother had for her child sort of melted something deep inside her heart. She felt kind of sad that she probably would never experience motherhood like Jenna had. Something seemed to be calling to her, some vague formless need to nurture. Instead of fearing it as a sign of losing more of her past self, she wanted to embrace it, to become more the woman she felt she was becoming. Jenna, looking at Beth, and seeing the emotions flitting across her face, rejoiced. Beth was indeed becoming a woman, finally feeling the nurturing instinct taking hold. She crossed the room to hug her new sister, needing no words as tears fell from Beth's eyes. "Come on, honey," she whispered. "Let's fix your face before we join the men, okay?" Beth nodded, not trusting herself to speak just then. With Jenna assisting, it was only a few minutes before they returned to the men sitting in the lounge. Jenna was determined to get Beth and Ted together in a relationship. She thought the two were perfect for each other and just needed a little extra push. She smiled inwardly, thinking of the challenge ahead. Beth wasn't surprised at finding herself seated next to Ted. She knew Jenna was working her matchmaking skills, but instead of trying to fight against it, she found it easy just to go with the flow. Feeling like a pawn at the will of another was kind of exciting. It absolved her of any responsibilities or guilty feelings she may have had about betraying the man she once was. It was a revelation, the release of worrying if she was doing the right thing. Ted was trying hard to keep his hands off the vision sitting next to him. He felt rather uncomfortable as his barely contained feelings wanted more room to move. He couldn't adjust without making things awkward, so he suffered silently as talk of kids and kittens continued. After agonizing for a while, Ted excused himself on the pretext of wanting to use the toilet. Beth caught a wink from Jenna and a subtle hand movement to indicate Ted's real problem. Richard hadn't seen anything and was surprised at Beth's giggle as she realized the reason Ted had excused himself. It was then that Beth realized she wielded a certain power over men, a power to be used wisely and not abused, lest she find herself dealing with unwanted attention. She knew from her experience as Colin what it felt like to admire attractive women, now that she had joined those ranks. She felt more in control of the situation. She might be physically weaker, but with a little body language, Beth thought she could navigate that. Ted returned, after flushing the toilet as evidence of its implied use. He sat down again, moving one arm casually over the back of the sofa they were sitting on. Beth could feel the heat of his arm, so close was it to her neck and shoulders. Feeling an urge to tease, she leaned back, her head upturned as she commented on the fancy light fixture in the ceiling. She felt Ted's arm shift, making it slip closer to her neck. Ted was feeling more relaxed, now that his adjustments had been seen to in the privacy of the bathroom. He had put his arm up on the back of the sofa, resting it behind Beth's back. When she made some comment about an ornate hanging light, she leaned back and craned her head up to see it. His arm lost its precarious position and slipped down onto her shoulders. He didn't know whether to withdraw it or leave it there, but he had a ready apology if she objected. He silently hoped she wouldn't move away, a signal he would take to pull his arm away. What he never expected was for Beth to snuggle against his arm, making it more comfortable and then turning and giving him a smile. Overjoyed at this simple act, he took the same liberty of gripping her far shoulder and giving a quick squeeze and a smile back. Beth felt the slight squeeze as Ted responded to her encouragement. She felt oddly pleased and comforted by the weight of Ted's arm around her shoulder. Some small voice of Colin was trying to tell her this was a male arm around her, but she tuned it out and tried to regain the sense of being protected. Thinking about it, she realized that Colin's voice, that she used to hear in her head, was being replaced with Beth's voice for her internal dialogues. She realized it wasn't a matter of her losing that part of Colin that she used to be, but rather getting used to hearing her new voice as she spoke and having that same voice in her internalizations. As discussion in the room turned to other things, Beth felt Ted move his hand and start combing her hair gently, running his fingers through it. She could feel the slight tugs, and it felt comforting, like the touch of a caring friend. She looked at Ted from the corner of her eye without moving her head. Ted was engrossed in a sporting topic with Richard, and seemed totally unaware of his actions. Beth didn't move, as the slight tugs felt rather nice, sort of like when a hairdresser works through your hair. Beth caught Jenna looking at Ted, before her eyes turned to Beth's. Jenna grinned, her eyes crinkling in amusement. Beth raised an eyebrow, then grinned back, wondering if Ted would realize what he was doing and stop. Richard, while talking to Ted, had noticed the arm around the shoulder and Ted fiddling with Beth's hair. In his opinion, they made a cute couple, and if the look of adoration he had glimpsed in Ted's eyes when he thought no one was watching was any indication, the future might see the two getting married. He hoped so, for himself. Marriage had been the greatest joy, made even more so at the birth of their daughter. He looked at his wife and made the minute nod that two people living together learn, meaning time to wrap things up. Well, time to let you two enjoy some time together without us holding you back, Richard laughed. Both Ted and Beth blushed, and Ted, extricating his fingers from Beth's hair, realized what he had been doing. Somewhere in the conversation, his hand had reached up and started to play with Beth's hair. Part of his mind was aware on a subliminal level of how pleasurable this was, but the information hadn't yet been passed to the part of his brain engaged in conversation. Sorry, Beth, I didn't mean to. I mean it was. He trailed off, seeing her smile. Ted, it's okay really, I found it rather nice, don't apologize, Beth interrupted. Beth stood and hugged Jenna, thanking her for everything and the lovely dinner. She then surprised herself by giving Richard a hug and a kiss on the cheek. Beth picked up her handbag and the bag containing her new lingerie, and on an impulse that came from nowhere, calmly asked Ted if he wanted to come over to her place for a nightcap. It was hard to tell who was the most surprised, Ted for being offered, or Beth for offering. Jenna grinned to herself, thinking it wouldn't take much before Ted would be scratching an itch that Beth would find developing. Beth walked out of the house, barely registering Ted's agreement to the offer. Her mind was running a mile a minute. What had she done? It had seemed so natural. It had slipped out before getting the once-over by her brain. She realized she wanted company now that Maggie was on loan, and Ted wasn't bad company. He made her feel aroused in a way she had never felt before, and she wanted to explore this further, hopefully without it getting out of control. With promises to meet up again and maybe return the offer of a meal, Beth climbed into her car and set off home. Her drive home was a blur as her thoughts spun in circles. Ted was right behind her as she entered the driveway and got out. Grabbing her bags, she locked the car as Ted parked his car beside hers. He offered to unlock the front door as she fumbled in her bag for the keys. She accepted, and was soon inside, closing the blinds as the lights went on. She dropped the lingerie on the small table in the lounge and went to the liquor cabinet to get a drink. Kicking off her shoes, she wriggled her toes in the deep pile of the carpet. Turning to Ted, who was standing awkwardly by the couch looking back at her, she asked if he wanted a drink. "Please, that would be nice. Do you have a beer? I think I need something to cool me down," he replied, swallowing a lump in his throat. Beth went into the kitchen and brought out a couple of cans of beer from the fridge. Flicking on the remote to the stereo on the way back, she handed Ted the beers before sitting down on the couch. The soft strains of a CD filled the room as she sipped her drink. She patted the seat next to her as Ted moved towards the seat facing her. "I won't bite, you know," she offered. "Now we have a chance to talk. I want to know how you got on today," she asked, holding her drink carefully as Ted sat down beside her. "Well, the first thing I did was destroy the mold, just in case they want to search my place. I broke it up along with the statue. No one will ever discover it now." "It seems such a shame to have to do that," Beth sighed. "Then what?" "Oh, about the will, you mean?" Ted asked, as he put one beer down and opened the other. At her nod, he took a pull of the beer and swished it around his mouth before swallowing. "Ah, that hits the spot." "Well, I did as you suggested," he continued, happy to be talking on a matter that distracted him as to how lovely Beth looked. The last thing he wanted was to let his feelings for her spoil things and maybe drive her away. "I put the document into the oxidizing oven for an hour on low. After that, I took them directly to your old place and put them in your filing system. If there's any doubt about the age of the will, the aging process I subjected it to should hold up any tests." Beth had suggested to Ted about aging the will with heat and high concentrations of oxygen, which could be achieved in a small oxidation oven at the labs used to subject test samples to accelerated aging processes. "Then what did you do?" asked Beth, moving closer to Ted so she could bring her legs and feet up on the couch. "Well," Ted started, finding Beth nudging against him rather distracting. "I went to the old plant to see what the FBI was doing." Beth, trying to tuck her legs up in a typical feminine fashion, found she needed both hands free to get her skirt arranged properly, so she handed Ted her drink while she got comfortable. She ended up leaning against Ted, who had lifted the arm nearest her with the drink in it as he tried to avoid her bumping it. He lowered it ready to give it back and found he had his arm around her as she took it from him with a quick "thank you." Ted was content to leave the arm draped over Beth's shoulder, as long as there were no objections. He continued to talk, feeling elated at her nearness. "That's when I heard about their suspicions and intent to question you. I tried to tell them it wasn't sabotage or that you had anything to do with it. I rang you not long after to prepare you. Now, I would like to hear what happened to you when they arrived," Ted finished. Beth told him about Smith and how he had treated her. Ted grew angry at that point but then laughed when she told him what had developed later. Ted hugged her and told her how proud he was of her standing up to the Smith guy. Beth felt safe knowing someone like Ted cared about what had happened to her. She looked up at Ted, her face only inches away. On an impulse born of gratitude, she arched her neck closer and kissed Ted on the cheek. Ted was taken aback at being kissed. This wasn't a public display for others, like when they had kissed before. He desperately wanted to return the kiss with interest, but was afraid he'd pressed too hard and spoiled the mood that was developing. Beth, on the other hand, realized she'd crossed a line she wasn't sure she was ready for. Luckily for her, Ted restrained himself from taking the next logical step. Beth wasn't sure how Ted felt, and she wasn't sure if she was disappointed or relieved that nothing had happened.